The Illinois Institute for Rehabilitation and Employment Research, IIRER, focuses on the intersection of health, community, and vocation. Our mission is to improve the well-being of individuals with disabilities and chronic health conditions by advancing their career development and community involvement. This webinar series is designed to assist community rehabilitation providers in their transition away from 14C subminimum wage work as required by the Dignity in Pay Act. Today's webinar is centered on data-driven decisions for organizations moving from a facility-based 14C subminimum wage employment model to a community-based model. Today's content is designed for executive staff. You can find all of our webinars supporting agency transition on the Dignity in Pay website. For this webinar, we encourage participants to jot down your thoughts related to the topics presented today. We have created a Dignity in Pay webinar notebook for your use. You may find a link to the notebook on the Dignity in Pay website. During this webinar, you can push pause at any time to jot down your thoughts. Our agenda today will cover key concepts related to data-driven decision-making. We will highlight the importance and impacts of data along with a step-by-step guide to get you started. As always, we will offer some practical tools and strategies to help you along the way. There are 3 key ideas to remember. First, data connects daily work to organizational decisions. What staff document directly shapes program design, staffing, and funding strategies. Second, good data reduces risk. It allows us to plan proactively instead of reacting to crises. Third, data must lead to action. Collecting information only matters if we use it to improve services. Strengthening employment outcomes, and continuously adjusting our strategy. The formula is simple. Data creates insight, insight drives action, and action creates sustainable change. Data is not paperwork, it's decision-making power. When data is accurate, leadership can see progress, address barriers early, and invest where it matters most. When data is missing, good work becomes invisible, and decisions are made on assumptions instead of evidence. Successful transformation depends on both leadership and frontline staff acting on the same information. Data-driven decision-making is what connects our strategy to our daily practice as we transition from 14C to competitive integrated employment. Executives use data to set priorities, allocate resources, and manage risk. Field staff generate the data that shows what's happening in real time with individuals, employers, and programs. How does your organization approach data and decision-making? Who is involved? How often do you revise your plan? As you transition from facility-based to community-based programs, do you intend to revisit your mission, vision, or goals? Press pause and take a moment to write down your thoughts. Data-driven decision-making changes how an organization leads. It allows leaders to make informed decisions based on real information, not assumptions. It helps identify risks early, strengthen compliance, and long-term sustainability. It makes staff's work more visible, which supports fair staffing patterns and smarter resource allocation. So more importantly, when your data guides your action, service quality improves and employment outcomes grow stronger. Data doesn't just measure performance, it improves it. We also have to acknowledge the real challenges. Data collection takes time. It can feel like paperwork if the purpose isn't clear. Staff might be unsure about what truly matters or how to document it correctly. So when data is inconsistent or incomplete, its value decreases and decision-making suffers. And without proper training, tools, and follow through, data quality declines and motivation drops. Recognizing these challenges is the first step towards building a stronger, more effective data culture. When data collection feels time-sensitive or burdensome, the solution is simplification. We can replace those long narratives with structured fields or simple checklists that capture what truly matters. Documentation should be built into the natural workflow moments, like at the end of a shift or after an employer visit, so it's not like an extra task. We should also eliminate data fields that aren't used for decisions and streamline systems to reduce duplication. When documentation is efficient and purposeful, staff time is protected and data quality improves. Streamlining data collection starts with clarifying and alignment. First, we define what truly matters by aligning data points to strategic goals and competitive integrated employment outcomes, and eliminating information that doesn't drive decisions. Second, we simplify the system, using structured fields, standardizing expectations, and reducing duplication so documentation is efficient and consistent. Third, we build data collection into daily workflow and ensure staff understand why the information matters. Finally, turn data into action by reviewing trends regularly and adjusting staffing, training, and programs based on what the data tells you. That's how strategy becomes action. When staff aren't sure what data matters or why it matters, documentation quality declines. We address this by clearly explaining expectations, showing examples of strong documentation, and providing quick reference guides. Consistent reinforcement in team meetings ensures everyone understands not just what to record, but how that information drives organizational decisions. Inconsistent data limits our ability to see patterns and manage risk. To solve this, we standardize documentation expectations across teams and implement regular supervisory review with feedback. Instead of waiting for audits, we identify and address gaps early. Simple dashboards or trackers can flag missing data before it becomes a large issue. Without proper training and feedback loops, data quality declines and staff motivation drops. Embed data training into onboarding and refreshers, use simple, mobile-friendly tools, and prioritize coaching over discipline. Most importantly, close the loop, sharing how data influenced your staffing, training, and program decisions, so staff see that their documentation truly matters. Now think about your own organization. What have been your biggest challenges related to data collection? Where have you experienced resistance, confusion, or stalled progress? Now consider the next step. What can you do? What is within your influence, structurally, operationally, or culturally, that could move this change forward? How will you begin? What is the first visible action? And finally, who will help? Press pause and take a moment to write down your thoughts. Now we introduce 5 steps to implementing data-driven decision-making. First, define what data truly matters right now. Second, align data collection with daily work so documentation fits naturally into existing routines. Third, review data regularly, not just for compliance, but to look for patterns and opportunities. Fourth, use that data to make at least one visible decision. And finally, close the loop by communicating what changed and why. We start by deciding what data truly matters right now. During the transition away from 14C, that means focusing on service location, staff time, contract utilization, and progress towards competitive integrated employment. You intentionally eliminate extra data that doesn't inform your decisions. Too much data creates confusion and documentation fatigue. A short, focused data list clarifies priorities, improves accuracy, and reduces burden on staff. Data collection should not feel like an extra task. Build it into what staff already do, using simple checkboxes, short notes, and tracking tools connected directly to service delivery and billing. Also, standardize expectations across teams. When documentation fits naturally into workflow, resistance decreases, accuracy improves, and the data quality becomes more consistent across the organization. Data should be reviewed regularly, not just during audits. Setting a weekly or monthly review schedule allows supervisors and managers to look for patterns, such as where services remain facility-based or where community employment efforts are increasing. When you review trends instead of searching for perfection, data becomes strategic planning rather than just a compliance requirement. One concept that strengthens the data-driven decision framework is performance accountability and continuous improvement. We've shown how data improves decisions and drives action, but transformation doesn't stop there. Leadership must measure performance over time, evaluate outcomes, and hold the organization accountable to the data. The true cycle is not just data to decision to action. It's data, decision, action, evaluation, and refinement. Without that continuous loop, progress can stall. Early wins may fade, and strategy can drift back towards legacy practices. Sustainable changes requires institutionalized learning and ongoing accountability. Early in the process, it's important to use data to make at least one clear, visible decision, like adjusting caseloads, shifting schedules to increase community work, or investing in targeted training. Then we communicate that decision and explain which data informed it. When staff see documentation directly influence action, they understand its purpose and engagement increases. Finally, close the loop. Share what the data shows, what decisions were made, and what comes next. Invite feedback and make adjustments as needed. This transparency builds trust and reinforces that data is a shared responsibility, not a top-down control mechanism. Closing the loop strengthens both data quality and long-term organizational change. As an organization moves from strategy to action, leadership must examine how data is being used to guide decisions. Collecting data alone does not drive transformation. Executive action does. The following questions are designed to prompt reflection on whether data is focused, actionable, and aligned with transition to competitive integrated employment. Press pause to write down your thoughts. Limit your organization to 5 data points to drive your transition to competitive integrated employment. What would they be? How would you use them to make visible decisions? Is there data you would stop collecting? The data to action framework ensures that data is not collected for compliance alone, but is used strategically to align services with competitive integrated employment, strengthening employer partnerships and financial stability, and proactively managing risks. When these 3 areas are intentionally connected, organizations can transition away from 14C with clarity, stability, and long-term success. You can find a full data to action framework, how field data drives executive decisions, on the Dignity and Pay website. This section shows how service and workforce data directly drive transformation. When field staff document where services occur, how skills are progressing and what workloads look like, leadership can clearly see whether the organization is aligned with competitive integrated employment. That data allows executives to redesign day services, adjust staffing ratios, and invest in targeted training. Without it, segregated practices stay hidden, staff burnout increases, and individuals may stall unnecessarily. Focused service data turns intention into structural change. Employer engagement and financial sustainability depend on accurate field data as well. When staff consistently document employer contacts, follow-ups, and billable activities, leadership can identify which industries yield results and where staff time is most effective. This allows for strategic allocation of resources and better contract utilization. Without that visibility, employer engagement can appear ineffective, and revenue opportunities may be missed. Clear data ensures that community employment grow and financial sustainability move forward together. Risk management and change sustainability are driven by early visibility. Field data on integration rates, documentation gaps, and stakeholder feedback allows executives to conduct risk assessments and adjust timelines before issues escalate. It also supports transparent communication with staff and families. Without consistent data, compliance becomes reactive, misinformation spreads, and resistance increases. Proactive data review reduces legal and funding risk while building trust and long-term stability during your transformation. Strong data cultures are built not just on collecting information, but on visibly acting on it. This question invites leadership to reflect on how data has recently informed a concrete decision and whether that connection was clearly communicated back to staff. Press pause and write down your thoughts. What is one recent decision you made that was clearly driven by data, and how did you communicate that back to staff? Executives set the direction for the transition away from 14C and determine which data truly matters. They use dashboards and reports to guide staffing, funding, and program redesign decisions while managing compliance and financial risk. Just as importantly, executives must clearly communicate how data informed those decisions. When leadership visibly acts on data, it reinforces accountability and builds trust across the organization. Middle managers are the bridge between strategy and practice. They translate executive priorities into daily expectations and regularly review data for trends, gaps, and risks. They coach staff on documentation quality and service alignment, and they escalate barriers when needed. Their role ensures that data is not just collected, but interpreted and acted upon consistently. Field staff generate the data that drives the organization. Through daily service delivery, they document community-based activities, skill development, and employer engagement. They share challenges and successes and adjust supports based on feedback and outcomes. Their accurate and timely documentation makes progress visible and directly influences program and staffing decisions. The advisory board provides strategic oversight and accountability. They review high-level outcome data, monitor transition progress, and ask critical questions about sustainability and risk. By grounding their guidance in data, they help ensure transparency, community trust, and long-term alignment with competitive integrated employment goals. Organizations often collect data to meet reporting and compliance requirements, but transformation requires more than compliance. This question encourages leadership to examine whether data is being used proactively to shape staffing decisions, funding strategies, and program redesign during the transition to competitive integrated employment. Are you using data primarily for compliance or as a proactive tool to guide staffing, funding, and program redesign? Press pause to write down your thoughts. This comparison highlights an important shift in how we use data. In facility-based settings, data often focuses on time spent in activities, productivity measures, staffing ratios, and compliance reporting. The emphasis is on monitoring what happens inside the building. In community-based and CIE-focused models, data shifts to measuring time in integrated settings, skill development, employer engagement, and employment progress. It becomes a tool for growth, funding alignment, and program redesign. The key difference is this: on-site data maintains operations, while off-site data drives transformation. Now we're going to apply the concepts we've discussed into a real-world scenario. River Valley Services, a mid-sized provider operating both facility-based and community services, began transitioning away from 14C subminimum wage employment. Leadership believed they were doing more community work, but they lacked clear data to confirm progress. Documentation existed, but it was inconsistent, overly detailed in some areas and missing in others. Data was primarily used for compliance reporting, not strategic decision-making. Despite strong intentions, data revealed that operational practices had not shifted as much as leadership assumed. When executives reviewed internal reports, they discovered 62% of service hours were still occurring in the facility-based setting. Staff schedules showed limited time allocated for employer outreach. Contract utilization for community-based services was underperforming. Documentation quality varied widely across the teams. What does current data show about continued 14C practices? Are assumptions about progress supported by evidence? Are decisions being driven by data or compliance deadlines? What clear data demonstrates progress towards CIE? As you review the scenario, I'd like you to think like the executive team. Effective problem solving begins with honest reflection. The questions you just heard are designed to help teams examine whether data is accurately reflecting current practice and actively guiding transition towards competitive integrated employment. You may rewind the video to hear the case again. Press pause and take time to write your thoughts. Looking at the data objectively, the organization still shows a meaningful percentage of service hours occurring in facility-based settings. Staffing schedules and billing patterns indicate that community-focused work has increased, but legacy structures remain. This tells the team that while intentions are aligned with CIE, operational shifts may not yet be fully embedded. The data provides a starting point for identifying where adjustments are most needed. While staff may feel that community engagement has improved, the data tells a more measured story. Employer contacts and CIE placements show some growth, but not consistently across the teams. This suggests that anecdotal success is not yet reflected in reliable metrics. The takeaway is that assumptions should always be validated through consistent, documented evidence. Current patterns suggest that many decisions are triggered by reporting timelines or compliance requirements rather than proactive trend analysis. Reports are generated for audits but not always used to guide staffing or program redesign. This highlights an opportunity to shift from reactive compliance management to regular strategic data review. The data does show progress. Community-based service hours have increased and employer outreach efforts are growing. However, sustained CIE placements and long-term employment outcomes remain areas for continued focus. Clear dashboards, tracking service location, contract utilization, and employment milestones will strengthen the organization's ability to demonstrate meaningful progress. The case study illustrates that transformation does not happen through intention alone. It happens when focused data is reviewed consistently and used to make visible decisions. Today's key takeaway is simple. Data only drives transformation when it leads to visible action. We learned that focused data clarifies priorities, alignment with daily work improves accuracy, and regular review turns reporting into strategic planning. Most importantly, when leadership uses data to make clear decisions and communicates those decisions, trust grows and progress accelerates. The transition from 14C to competitive integrated employment is not powered by intention alone. It is powered by data that guides action. Please take a moment to complete our survey. Your input helps us target future training and technical assistance products. This webinar was supported by funding from the Illinois Department of Human Services, Division of Developmental Disabilities. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the views of IDHS.